Special Ad hoc Committee meeting, April 9th, 2025.
Updates to the zoning and platting map for the city of Bucyrus. Members present, James Mee, Vicki DeShawn, Bill Stuckert, Landon Hill, and myself, Mike Keefe, as chair. Any public participation at this time? Seeing none, we are updating the zoning and platting map, chapters 1157, 1159, 1161, and 1163. We are going to look at the text of these sections first, and then looking at the map after we review these certain sections to see what needs to be changed. Starting off with section 1157.01, the different zoning districts. RE, Residential Estate District, R1, R2, and R3 for residential districts, AR for Apartment Residential District, MHR for Manufactured Home Residential District, NB for Neighborhood Business District, GB for General Business, DB for Downtown Business, GI for General Industrial, LIC for Limited Industrial Commercial, SU for Special Use District, and FP for the Floodplain Overlay District and floodways. Section 1150, first off, do you guys foresee the need for any additional districts to be added to the zoning map at this time?
So the one that Kurt brought up the other day about Upper, and they're in a, what
The
was that?
highway, the highway business.
Yeah,
Well, for here in town, most of that is in the LIC, and the rest is in the general industrial.
so there's no need for it.
I don't see a need for it. I mean, especially since the other industrial area is not in town for like Timken. But that would still be in general industrial. So, I don't see a real need for that to be added.
Okay. I'm good with that. Just a question.
Anyone else have?
I have a
Brendan?
question. What are your thoughts on the tiny home thing? It's gaining popularity.
That would have to be, as of right now, the only district that we could have it, because there is no, is that in here? I put a chart, it's the last page of the packet. There's a chart breakdown of the required square foot callouts for homes in the R1, R2, and R3. In R3, there is no minimum square foot requirement as of right now. Because most of the homes well, there's a mix between the R2, R3. A lot of the homes existing don't even meet the square footage requirement. Some of these older homes. So the only residential district as of right now that tiny homes would probably be considered from what they're calling them, accessory dwelling units, would be in the R3.
Okay.
But in other towns in the state, they're looking to allow them in all residential districts, but the requirement is in those cities that they would have to have separate utilities, separate utility connections. but they'd also be paying for the stormwater charge that the main home or residence is paying. It'll be treated the same as a single-family home.
I was going to refer that legislation to Platting in the next meeting.
Is it in reference to putting a tiny home on a vacant lot or using it as an accessory dwelling unit that you were
From what
referring to?
I've read so far, it's all an accessory dwelling unit. It's not an individual on a building lot.
So that would need to be modified per the R3 as an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah,
You'd have two uses on a single lot. If it was a tiny home as just a new build, then potentially there's no issue in the R3 because there is no minimum square footage requirement.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have a little bit of a problem there with the R3 district. Many of the lots currently in the R3 district have such narrow width that they don't even qualify for building as it is. I think a lot of these lots could be utilized for tiny homes with the proper requirements for utility connections.
and foundation.
Exactly, foundation as well, right.
Do
Just,
you think maybe we should require that, they have the same foundation requirements as manufactured homes?
Yes.
Utilities?
Utilities, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Stuckert, I was going to raise that point as we got to the R3 development standards as well. I think there's some stuff that we can look at as far as minimum lot width and not only in the R3, I think there's some other stuff to look at there with the residential districts.
but I really don't think that they should be considered as accessory structures, no. Unless, you have a lot, and I don't see the majority of the R3 lots having enough area to put a tiny home on along with another residential home.
Yeah.
So they should be on their own lot.
Yeah, they should be on their own lot, right?
And they should be restricted to R3.
Will this requirement, if we're gonna restrict tiny homes to be on their individual lot, is that going to open us up for mobile homes to be put on individual city lots instead of a mobile home park? Because most mobile homes have a bigger square footage than a tiny home.
Currently, manufactured homes are allowed on other lots. It's just that they have to be on a foundation, and there are
Right.
certain requirements for them. But because a lot of them are smaller than the, of course, R3 doesn't have a minimum
Right.
requirement for building.
But for a permanently sited manufactured home, it's 900 square foot of living area, so tiny homes would probably be smaller than that.
Right, exactly,
So there may need to be some additional research into that,
right, right.
whether they're designated differently or, because ultimately isn't that kind of what it is? Are they stick built or are they manufactured, you know what I mean?
They're both.
Right,
Yeah.
Could be either.
right.
Mhm.
I could build a tiny home, or I could have one brought in. So it's a one brought in manufactured home.
Exactly.
Maybe we need to look at legislation that's already been passed at other cities.
Yeah, I have that on my
municipalities.
desk currently for Marysville, Westerville, City of Columbus, Cleveland, Bowling Green, Dayton, and different boroughs, or should I say boroughs? Corporations in Cincinnati.
Do we have any reference to any of the smaller communities, such as like Galleon, Crestline, Upper Sandusky?
I haven't heard
Shelby,
anything.
anything?
I know Shelby's heard about, somebody inquired about doing tiny homes in an area in Shelby, but I think they came back from having issues with utility access. So that'd be something that we have to look into as well.
Right, right. Well, we have so many lots from homes that have been torn down, sitting vacant, you know, that could be utilized for tiny homes because they're too small now for the larger requirement, especially the square footage of the lot itself or width and so forth, that they could be utilized for tiny homes.
I know I've had 2 inquiries on tiny home requirements, or if it's allowable in the last 2 weeks. So one was in the R3, and then the other one I do believe was in the R2, not far from the AR, down the road on Woodlawn.
Well, R2 has, was it 1,900 square feet? Minimum building area? That's 1.5 to 2 floor. 1 floor is 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
So unless that's changed, a tiny home wouldn't qualify in either the R1 or the R2 district.
Well, it's something when we review each district, if we are going to adjust the square footage requirements.
Any other legislation that you've looked at, do they allow them in the R1s or R2s, or?
I haven't seen any mention of an R1. Mostly I've seen is the accessory being either attached to an existing single family or an accessory, or a detached to either a garage or a separate structure on the lot. But no mention of what district that they're restricting them to. Marysville's current, what they're looking at is being available to be put citywide under these certain conditions. So I don't know if, say, if we did that, then say if Vicky wanted to put a accessory dwelling in her backyard for her grandkids to live, if you would have to do you'd probably have to require a whole separate utility tap and something like that.
So I would consider that an R1, right?
Yeah, that'd be R1.
I wouldn't want to see any tiny homes out there.
Well, I would just say that based on the definition of the R1 versus an R3, you know, the R1 calls out discouraging large concentrations of intensive development with higher density. So that's the reason there's larger requirements for lot width, setbacks in the outer areas of town that are zoned R1. And the R3, its definition probably more aligns with something like that.
Yes.
With densities consistent with existing development. So as you get into most of the R3 areas, it's in the older, more densely developed areas of town where you have higher density and would, you know, kind of meet that definition of what the R3 was originally created for, if we're working within the definitions of our current code.
So let's look at that. we'll look at that when we get to that section. But we'll definitely have to get more information on that.
Little side note, Mike, on the tiny homes. My husband is officially retiring next Friday. He would be the one I'd be putting in the tiny home. The grandkids would be in the house with Nana.
Strike that from the record, please.
Oh, I love him dearly,
Okay,
but I still stand by.
all right. All right. All right, so on 115702, official zoning district map. We are going to be adjusting some boundaries of the map in this ad hoc. It's pretty much self-explanatory what 115702 is. 115703, what I just mentioned. I do have a comment about this. The district boundaries, I've noticed some of the boundaries are not following the center of the streets. Some are falling on right-of-way lines. Shouldn't the map be adjusted for center of street instead of right-of-way lines of areas?
You know, I think based on the reading this 1157.03, it can be any number of type of boundary lines. Property lines, lot lines, center lines of streets, alleys, streams, railroads. I would say ultimately, as long as it's associated with some type of boundary line, whether it's a lot
Right.
line or a road center line, that's probably okay.
Okay.
And ultimately leaves it in your lap as the zoning inspector to interpret such boundary line.
Yep.
I do agree with Mike, though. I think that boundary lines that are divided by streets should be the center of the street.
All right, moving on to 115704, newly annexed areas. We don't have any newly annexed areas. And the map shows what is currently annexed into the city.
So you're gonna change 115703?
Yeah, I would like to get rid of, well, there's some boundaries that are by property lines.
Yeah, that ability has.
Quite
to
a
be there,
few.
because they're not all done by streets.
Right.
That designation needs to stay in there.
Yeah, so no change to 115703. About annexed areas, I don't see any changes for that.
No, I think that process is fine. It says that within 3 months of the annexation, planning commission has to make a designation, but in my experience, that has been done as
Faster.
part of the annexation process right along with it, so
Okay,
bringing it in as an RE is not really that big of a deal, because ultimately it gets changed pretty quick.
okay.
Yeah, I had a question about that. It says, within the 3 months from date of annexation, Planning Commission shall present a zoning plan for the annexed territory to the city council. I just kind of wanted an explanation of what this plan is and why it's needed.
Just the way, the mechanisms by which it works, so the outer boundaries, this is kind of based on the definition of the RE district itself, but when a property is zoned in and is residential, technically it starts with an RE designation. And then if that needs to be changed, then that's either up to the property owner to request a specific designation or up to the planning commission to recommend a specific designation.
Okay.
And normally it's a part of that, I think normally it's a part of that process where council authorizes the services and utilities and all that, part of that annexation legislation.
Yeah. It says, the city council may hold a public hearing on proposed zoning plan. Shouldn't that be shall? Isn't that required?
I was under the assumption it was required.
I wish it wasn't.
So it should be should
That was
instead of
kind of
may?
one
Change
topic.
may to shall?
It hasn't been done in the past.
And I mean, this is
For
like,
grammar.
it would probably depend on, I guess,
Shall be held.
how big of an
No, shall.
area you're
Yeah, that's
annexing
right.
as well is probably a consideration. I mean, if it's a single property that's being annexed into town, is it really necessary that everybody gives their input as to what the zoning designation is? Or if it's right next to an R3, does it just need to be an R3? I suppose it's,
But what if it's, yeah,
or if it's right next to an R1, does it just need to be an R1 if it's just a single property? Now, if it's a large area, you know, if we end up annexing a bunch of separate parcels, different types of uses, then that, you still have the ability to hold a public hearing if need be. But if it's a single property being annexed, then is it really necessary to have a public hearing for that designation?
what about if we annex farmland into the city and it's adjacent to the industrial park? Shouldn't that stay as just like RE instead of general industrial
Or R1? Yeah.
or R1?
Both allow for non-animal farming. But in an instance where it's a specific property and a specific use, it seems a bit of overkill to hold a public hearing if everybody, including the property owners, in agreement with there is still some oversight as it goes through the planning commission, but
I think it'd already be decided what it's gonna be.
But notice still has to go to adjoining property owners to
Yeah.
notify them about the change though, right?
Yeah, I think that's,
no, I mean, not by this definition. Planning commission doesn't typically offer specific notification procedures. They're just a general notification like a council meeting or whatever, 24-hour notice.
But it's my understanding that when the annexation petition is filed by the individual or their agent to have a specific property annexed, that the landowners have to be notified, and they also, I'm trying to think of, I don't think there's any sign off. I'm not gonna say. I'm trying to remember the annexation petition that was filed by our former law director, Mr. Gernert, because I know there was certified letters sent to the individuals that lived around him. But I don't know if they signed off on the annexation petition or not.
no, I think annexation petition comes through county commissioners.
Correct.
I do not believe, let me remember. I don't remember anybody else besides county commissioners signing off, besides maybe mayor
I guess
or
that's
council president.
Oh, the county commissioners, they have to approve the annexation.
Right, but I.
And there's a resolution.
At one point, I remember signing off on a annexation plat to, I do believe, the city of Willard, and the property was from UM Township when I was trustee. I thought I remember signing off on an annexation plan.
Well, Vicky's example is a good one to the point I'm trying to make here.
I think it's on-
Brian's was annexed in directly across the street from an R1 designation. His was the only property annexed in. Would it really have been necessary to hold a public hearing for that determination to be made that it should also be R1? I don't think so.
That was a big mess too.
Well, the annexation portion of it was, but the zoning designation portion of it is pretty straightforward, in my opinion. You wouldn't just have a separate island of R3 out there by itself. So having the option of may hold a public hearing, I think is okay, because may means we still have the option to hold one if it's necessary.
Okay, that's fine. I just thought it already was a requirement to hold a public hearing.
For a change in designation, it is. From a currently zoned designation to a new designation, it is a requirement.
Okay.
But for an annexed property, it's,
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay, so that line, city council shall hold a public hearing on proposed zoning plan.
No, we're going to leave it as may.
Leave it as may.
Yes. That's my opinion.
I agree.
Okay. So no changes on that. Okay, so now we are going to 1159 RE Residential Estate District. This district is established to encourage the continuance of agricultural use, to permit low-density residential development in areas which may not have current access to water and sewer, and to provide for areas as needed for future city expansion. I have a comment about this district. We currently have a couple businesses in this RE district along Beale, and one of them is a BZA topic. Now, the use for the property isn't wholesale or retail, but it's a ag-related business. Does the use or what the business is allow for, what I'm getting at is, what they are doing, is it gonna be a permitted use? I mean, it's an agricultural use.
It's a commercial use though, and what
Yeah, but it's
you're
a
talking
commercial
about
use.
two different things, because that was formerly Rush's machine shop down there, and essentially you just have a transition from a company to a company, but the use hasn't really changed. It was a manufacturing type company, and it'll be more of a processing or packaging or whatever, but it's still an industrial type designation.
Okay,
So it's going to continue as a non-conforming use because it's commercial use in a residential district. But yeah, that's a separate question.
okay.
Now, if that would have sat vacant for 2 years and lost its grandfathering as a non-conforming use, then it would have been a bigger deal, although there are now avenues to pursue that through a reinstatement, I think we referred to it as, or whatever that was, we changed not too long ago, but, yeah.
All right, permitted uses, ag uses, agricultural building structures to carry out ag activities. One-family detached dwellings, public and private parks, open spaces, provided not less than 75% of the total area of the property is left in an undeveloped state, public or private golf courses. Accessory uses are allowed for detached garages, carports, tool and garden sheds, accessory structures for ag use, temporary buildings, private swimming pools, tennis courts, similar facilities, home occupations, temporary roadside stands, and then conditional uses, animal boarding, animal hospitals, clinics, churches, public assemblies, cemeteries, and then development standards. Lot size is not really in. The minimum lot area for these are 1 acre if the site's not, okay, it's not served by water and sewer. Is the 1 acre lot requirement for septic? For the health permit? Landon, do you know if that's?
I don't know. I don't suspect we're gonna be getting many annexed on the edge of town unless they are receiving our
Utilities.
service, would be my assumption.
Yeah.
What does say are such size as approved by the Crawford County Health Department, whichever is larger.
Yeah.
So that should cover that.
Minimum lot frontage, 500 feet, frontage on a dedicated improved street or road highway. Minimum front yard depth, 75 feet, side yard 20. Side yard width, minimum sum of side yard widths, 40 feet. Why do we have E when minimum side yard says 20? It's kind of redundant.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
Minimum rear yard depth, 50.
Can you go back to B?
Unless you're looking at it and you're on a corner lot and then you only technically have one side yard. And then that would then be required to be 40 feet. Seems kind of aggressive, but these lots are, I mean, we can look at the map whenever you guys are ready, but there's only a couple of areas that are designated as RE on the outside of town here.
Corner of Beale and Whetstone.
And then the golf course and that is all RE, Red Oak Court, or Brookside Drive, I should say.
Oh,
And the golf course. So there's really not a whole lot of instances, and any of them are probably, anything that's gonna be, I guess that's the question, is this is specifically as defined for newly, it seems like it's set up for newly annexed properties.
Yeah.
Are they gonna have 150 feet of frontage, I guess is the question. And does it matter, because if they're annexed in, they would just be legally non-conforming at that point, right?
Correct.
What about the lot frontage, Brandon?
I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same feet. You said a different footage, so I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, that's 150.
Yeah, I don't see a need to change any of those.
I don't really either. I don't really have much on the RE designation.
I mean, I know this maximum building height came up for the gentleman that bought the house on the corner of Beale and Whetstone when he inquired about a pole barn because of the size. I was trying to figure out what the height was gonna be of the peak of his barn. figured it was gonna be around 25 feet in the air. Because he's looking to put a pretty large barn up. I believe he was looking at an 80 by 160 barn. So, you don't have enough land for that, Jim. Yet, anyway. So, I don't see any changes needed for building height. So I think 115906 is good, no changes.
So what's the building height?
Right now, maximum building height is 40 feet. Yeah, for building silos, windmills, and other structures.
Okay, gotcha.
So the way I read that is it's 40 feet for buildings, and then additionally, silos, windmills, or any other structure considered as an accessory use may exceed this height
May exceed,
provided
yes.
such structures maintain distance equal to their height
Right.
to an adjacent property or zone. So theoretically, silos, windmills, and any
Could be
other
taller.
structures.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to look at specific property under the RE zoning designation? I think there's some questions out here on Whetstone that potentially some of these developments may not be necessarily suited for that RE designation, but
We're not exactly gonna change the map now, so
yeah.
we're just talking about
Like some of the lots could probably be R1 instead of RE.
Well, and you have the, I'll call it Ultra Care, but I don't even know if that's what it's called anymore.
Is that the nursing home?
Yeah, you have the nursing homes out there that
Wouldn't that be SU?
theoretically, yeah.
you get taxes off them.
I think we do. I think county gets taxes off of,
I sort of under the impression anything
unless they're owned by a church.
under,
Is it, I don't know.
Say that again, Jim?
anything under an SU, we wouldn't get taxes from. So these,
Is that right?
I thought, like schools,
Well, I know
we have schools.
under SU, cemeteries, schools, and I thought nursing homes were under SU.
Yeah, they are. Healthcare, general and specific hospital clinics, convalescent centers, I don't know if that's the correct term anymore. Institutions for care of children or senior citizens.
So I was sort of leaning towards anything we don't get, we're not getting a tax under is special use and state garage. Or the water department or the
All the,
service garage.
all the city properties,
City properties, yes.
or any government properties,
Government, city properties, schools,
parks,
parks.
and just take them out of whatever
Yeah.
district they're in.
I did not prepare for a SU conversation yet, so.
Well, it's something to think.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, we just
Yeah.
come back to next meeting.
yep.
All right, we're back to R1 and R2s.
So we really don't have any changes to the RE map at all.
And if we want to keep that, I was curious how this, what the mechanisms of us going through these parts of the code would be anyway. If that's what you think, Jim, we just talk about it and maybe take a look at it, but we're not actually making any changes. We're just going through the text of it at this point. It doesn't matter. I'm open to whatever, but
Well, it's whatever, if we find something that needs
Yeah.
changed, I think maybe you should hold a vote on it and change
Yeah.
it, or?
Okay. I'm good on RE. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
All right, do we need to do a roll call vote on each section as we progress?
No, you can just do a voice vote.
There wasn't any changes to vote on.
So
Right.
that changes were,
So
okay,
there's no changes. So
okay, all right, awesome,
But moving forward, you can just do a voice vote.
okay. R1, R2 residential districts. There's been some talk about getting rid of the R2 residential district. Are we leaning towards switching R2 to R3?
Well, I think that's part of a conversation that I was interested in having this afternoon. Currently, the R1 and R2 are both under 1161. When you look at the map, I fail to see why the areas that we currently have designated as R2 should be treated any differently than the areas that we have designated as R3.
They are pretty similar, right?
Yeah, the vast majority of them are very similar. I mean, you can scroll into these areas and I would challenge anybody to explain to me how the designation was made that this little portion needs to be R3, but this little portion needs to be R2. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me. And it feels like if you're in an area, a neighborhood, the characteristics of which don't change with the zoning designation, but then you're held to the higher standard of the R2 zoning district, which includes higher, or bigger setbacks, bigger lot size requirement, et cetera, as well as square footage requirements for homes, that type of thing. It seems like it's penalizing property owners who were unfortunate enough to receive the R2 designation, where right across the street is an R3 designation. My initial thought, and I didn't run through every single property or every single situation, but would be to kind of eliminate the R2 and bring it into the R3.
So you,
The only real question being this one out, the Arrowhead is split, and where Ricky Lee Lane and Southern turns into Kerstetter, that holds an R2 designation, with old Arrowhead, the first portion of Arrowhead, holding an R1 designation. So that's the only one that was, as far as R2 goes, that would be questionable throwing it into an R3. But like I said, many of these areas, I mean,
when you want to throw that into an R1 though?
potentially, yeah, potentially. But I mean, look at, how's this an R3, but everything around it is an R2? It doesn't really make sense to me.
I think that was part of our early conversations too, is to get rid of those islands out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for an R2 is, if we're gonna move it to an R3, are any of the R2s currently engaged in non-animal farming?
This one would be.
That one would be?
But that could then be absorbed to R1 potentially, because it
Could be.
allows non-animal farming. And potentially up here there could be, but again, I mean, on the northwest side here,
You got a lot of farmland up there.
but what's the difference between down here on, Dean or Manette or whatever, and then getting down here to this end? There's really not, you look around your neighborhood and they only have to have a 4-foot side yard setback, but I have to have an 8-foot and we're right across the street. To me, I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
There's also some land out Stetzer's that's in R1, that's farmland.
So I suppose we could make an appropriate designation if there was, that those could maybe be absorbed into R1, but I think the vast majority of them could be absorbed into R3. The only difference.
Sounds good to me.
The only difference being,
So,
if we part of the Arrowhead development, I would call it, I guess, phase 2, even though there was multiple phases there. Part of the later developments out in Arrowhead included common wall two-family dwellings, which are a permitted use in the R2 as well as the R3, so there would be no issue there. It would be if that designation flips to an R1, then common wall two-family dwellings are no longer permitted use because those are not permitted in the R1.
Correct, but if they're already built, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that wouldn't be an
not-
issue. They would be legally
Right.
non-conforming, but going forward, if they were intent to develop them with more common wall two-family dwellings, it would be an issue.
So you're actually talking about absorbing part of them into R1 and the other part into R2.
Part of them into R1, the other part into R3.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the properties, like in the inner parts of the city, where it is already more densely developed, they would see the benefit of no longer having the, currently in the R2, the front yard setback and rear yard setback are 25, side yard setback is 8. In the R3, that goes down to 20 front and back and 4 for your side yard. So those lots that are already smaller would have some relief as far as placing accessory structures, additions, whatever that would be more in line with the more densely developed areas of town.
Then you'd open up a good majority of town for tiny home development or placement.
Unless it's an R1, we could open it up for R3.
Yeah.
So is there any legal issues with doing that? Executive session? I mean, everybody's gonna be grandfathered in, it's just future. This is all for the future.
Okay, I'm going to ask the question. Can you explain again what we're looking at for the Ricky Lee Lane area, which you're saying is,
Up for debate, it being that it's out here.
and I will just be right up front, the reason I'm asking the question is because my mother owns one of those.
That's current common wall two-family dwelling.
Exactly.
So, I mean, those would be treated as a legally non-conforming use. There would be no issue with them moving forward. It would just be if that section of R2 that is currently out here, if we do away with that R2, a new designation would have to be assigned to it. Would it simply be absorbed by the R1, and then any new houses out there wouldn't be able to be common wall two-family dwellings?
Okay.
They would have to be single-family detached dwellings.
Even if with this, since that next phase, that next phase is phase 5 for that subdivision in the vacant land right now. If they go to develop, which they've already,
Expressed an
they're gonna start building a house on that one stub street on the south side. I know it's a single family home, but if they decide to, hey, can we put multifamily up that new street? Since it was previously allowed in the previous phases, are they gonna be able to get a variance? Put a multifamily house in there?
Wouldn't be a variance.
So it'll depend.
Would it have to be or no?
on-
It wouldn't be a variance, it would be they'd have to rezone it.
Rezone it?
Right, so I guess the question depends is how much have they relied on the fact that the previous phases allowed common wall two-family dwellings? How much have they relied on that? Have they built any of those in previous phases?
Yes.
Then we're kind of backed into a corner, otherwise they would be relying on us, and then we change it, pull the rug out from under them, and all of a sudden, if they have more planned, they can't do it, right? Kind of limits where we can put it.
Yeah. I mean, the most recent approval of that subdivision is something like 20 years old and no longer valid.
Okay.
So new plans would have to be completely developed, resubmitted on all fronts, not only on, as far as EPA goes for sewer installation, as far as.
Okay, so this
EPA
wasn't
goes
like a
for-
recent thing?
No. This is back to, yeah.
Okay.
Lot widths need change too.
Different company?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then we're fine.
Mr. Harder passed away and committed builders. Mr. Lutz now owns the land there.
Gotcha. Then we should be fine.
So it'd be replatted anyway.
And so the changing, if we would change the district for those homes that are already there, that are the, what do you call it, double wall?
Common wall, two-family dwelling.
Even for the sale of that particular home, there would be no issue?
No,
Okay.
yeah, part of that process, they'll reach out for like what they refer to as a zoning verification, and they know there's always a specific designation for whether or not the use is permitted or legally non-conforming, or, yeah, so it'll be a legally non-conforming use forever. I mean, those uses you probably don't see being abandoned anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
I just don't like that being one and then the other.
Well,
The
the
same
street,
development.
the proposed street was to go right here anyway, so
Uh-huh.
one half would have been R2, one half would have been R1.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it seems silly, but I just think, and maybe that's one we look at separately, I just think, particularly the ones that are in the inner city area, more densely developed area, I think it makes sense to lessen the restrictions when you're looking right across the street and it's the exact same neighborhood, but they have different requirements. It doesn't,
Should that development be like a special review? But then we're gonna open up for issues if we do that.
like I said, I don't have all the answers, but that was one that jumped to my mind for the sake of simplifying the code and for the sake of, I guess, being fair to the property owners in the majority of the R2 zoning district.
So Lutz hasn't submitted any plans whatsoever about two-family dwellings or single-family dwellings or anything?
Not specifically, no, but I mean, based on the costs that I have seen for that development, he's probably gonna wanna try and get as many, develop it as densely as possible, I guess, but
And wasn't this the one that we were looking at, the DeWine housing?
yeah, I don't think.
He was
Yeah, but
looking
they
to
didn't
use-
qualify
I don't think it-
because-
He did not qualify?
No, because
Okay.
that DeWine thing's for multifamily
Okay.
Low income.
and low income,
Oh,
and wouldn't even be in that district.
And I mean, I'm open to other changes, I guess, if we're reluctant to do away with the R2, I'm open to other changes to it as well. I just, for it to be treated more closely to the R3, I think is, I guess, kind of what I'm getting at.
Because I had another, can you zoom up by the high school up on Mary Street? Right down on Mary Street. That area down there, go in front of the high school, that is all, is that our, I can't see, what,
The yellows are one.
that's R1? Why are the houses on the street R1 when they're surrounded by R3?
That's a good question.
Because the schools should be SU. And then the property to the west of the school probably should be RE. because of the size of the lot. What is, oh, that's a nursing home, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So, right across from the high school, isn't there where Rinker's at? Doesn't he have cows?
To the south.
He's out here.
He
He's out here?
has
Oh, okay.
cows
Yeah,
back,
that should be RE.
back, or down, Landon. He has cows right there.
Gotcha, okay.
I think I'm pretty sure he's legal.
Oh, yeah, he's legal. That's a good question.
So I guess the other thing, when you get to the development standards under 1161.05, the table there breaks down the difference between R1 and R2. Is there anything there that jumps out at you? If we eliminate the R2, obviously it's not necessary to change anything for the R2 side. How do we feel about the minimum building areas for either zoning designation, being 1,800 square feet for the R1, 1,500 square feet for the R2 for 1 stories? There's been interest in certain properties, I think, that had an R1 designation, but they are looking to build a new house that potentially would downsize coming into the city, and the 1,800 square foot requirement,
Seemed high.
yeah.
Almost sounds like they both should be 1,500 feet,
Well, I was gonna say if we did away
or
with,
even lower.
if we did away with the R2, 1,500 feet for the R1 is what I was gonna recommend. And that still maintains the integrity of the
The
districts are supposed to offer it
Right.
at several housing densities, but to discourage large concentrations of intense development is still the definition, and I think it still does that with that requirement for square footage.
So you want to decrease the R1 to 815? The 18 to 15?
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea, dropping it down to 1,500 square feet.
Do we want to do that to the 2-story too? 1 point,
Because some of these condo and ranch plans are anywhere between 1,200 and 1,900 square feet. If we dropped it down to 1,500 feet, drop the 1 story to 15 and then, well, no.
Well, my initial thought was if we do end up getting rid of the R2, that we would just bring the 1,500 and the 1,900 square feet over to the R1.
Oh, yeah.
It was my initial thought.
But are we gonna be holding the rear and side yard
Right.
setbacks?
I personally, I didn't think that was that big of an issue. Most, not all locations with the R1 designation
Yeah.
can probably comfortably accommodate 10-foot side yard setbacks.
Right.
But, you know, something that would certainly up for debate while we're talking about it. That's what we're here for.
really drop those lot width down at all, especially with the side yard setbacks.
I'm in an R1 and I'm at 77 width.
Is that before or after that? Did you add frontage? You were narrower, weren't you?
I was narrower and I added 12 and a half feet. But I'm still under the 80 feet.
Right, but you're you're existing
Yeah.
non-conforming.
Grandfather though, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
so this is for like anything new.
So how about the minimum lot area?
Say, I mean, most of them, if you're gonna have an 80-foot minimum lot width, most of them are probably gonna meet that 12,000 square foot requirement. I was just using Vicky's house as an example and doing some measurements here. But like out in her subdivision, they're all of such a size that would meet that, and she's got 80-foot frontage on Hillcrest, resulting in over 15,000 square foot of a lot. If we maintain the 80-foot minimum lot width, the square footage lot area shouldn't necessarily be a problem.
Yeah, I think we should keep the 12,000 square feet. If you drop it down to 10,000, then you're gonna have a problem with setback.
So the minimum lot area for R1, we're going to keep at 12,000. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
And then what are we doing with the minimum lot width? Are we keeping it at 80?
Yeah, you'd have to keep it at 80, because if you leave it at 12,000, you can do a 150-foot deep lot. If you drop it to 10, you're down to 125,
Okay.
which
Yeah, those are
I
kind of
think some of
tied
the
together.
lots out there are only 125 or 135 foot deep.
So then what are we doing with the minimum front yard depth?
I think the setbacks are all okay if we're maintaining current width and current square footage.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then we're changing the minimum building area, 1 story, we're going from 1,800 down to 15.
100.
And then for the 2-story, 1.5 to 2-story, we're going from 2,000 down to 1,900. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then what are we doing with the maximum building height?
We're not changing that.
That's, okay, well, yeah, I guess, because even in
That's
R2,
one-
it's the same as R1.
That's one thing
Okay.
I brought up when I saw that we were gonna be looking at this. I always wondered why the building height was set at a certain height. I was always under the assumption that building heights or house heights were set locally by how high the ladder truck reached at the fire department. That's how I was taught when we did work in the city of Sandusky. So I don't know, Brandon, have you ever heard of that? Being at the maximum what the fire department could reach for a 2 or 3 story house?
I was gonna say, isn't that why we had to buy a bigger ladder truck?
Yeah. I know that's typically why fire departments get
It's
higher towers and everything. Let's leave 35.
I thought the max building height was set basically for the aesthetics of the neighborhood.
So all the peaks aren't over 35 feet high.
Right, so you don't have one big towering place
Come on.
there spotted around.
So how about the verbiage then, common wall, two-family dwellings are not required to meet the side yard requirements? Or are we no longer having common wall? Is
Well,
that,
If we do away with the
Two.
R2, they won't be allowed in the
Okay.
R1.
gotcha, gotcha.
They are still permitted in the R3.
Okay,
I guess that's the second part of the puzzle is what then becomes allowable in the current R2 designation that is different in the R3.
okay.
And the only thing that I'm aware of would be under conditional uses in the R3, 1163.04C, it allows for multifamily dwellings, subject to the requirements there listed below. So any R2 that is absorbed into an R3 would then have the designation allowing for multifamily dwellings per those requirements there. Again, the vast majority of them are right across the street from an area where it could happen anyway, so I don't see a big issue with it. The only one being, again, that outlier out at Arrowhead and potentially up there on the northwest side by the school, but
So I guess where are we saying then that common wall, two-family dwellings are going to be allowed? If they're going to be allowed?
if we do away with the R3, they would be allowed in the R, if we do away with the R2, it would be allowed in the R3.
Okay, so if they're allowed in the R3, then is it necessary to have that language?
It wouldn't be if we do away with the R2.
It would or wouldn't be?
Wouldn't be.
Okay,
It would then be, but under the R3 development standards, 1163.05
Gotcha.
D2, individual units are not required to meet the side yard regulations where the common wall meets. So
Great.
it's already in the
gotcha,
R3.
thank you. And just for transparency purposes, the only reason I asked that question is because I had to sit up here with my mother and go through that very issue. I'm not sure who we met with, but I know Bill Tenike was the head of the committee. And, yeah, it was interesting.
Well, it doesn't really make sense to have that language anyways. I mean, with a common wall, there is no space between anyways, so.
That's the question. I was just about to ask.
Possibly
I was-
be a side yard there.
Setback.
Mike, can you explain that to me like I'm 5? Because this sentence makes no sense to me.
Common wall, two-family dwellings.
Now, let's just put it this way. I'm not sure if this language came about as a result, but I know that when my mother went to purchase, that the bank said, that's not the proper description, and we had to come here, and we had to have Harders come, and neighbors come, and say, who cares? Who cares?
Who cares?
And, yeah, so,
So the way Bill and I are reading this is that it's saying that when the common wall meets, which is, in my interpretation, in the
Zero
middle of
level.
the house, right?
Exactly,
How,
that's what I said.
exactly, so can you explain it to us?
Zero level.
The side yard is not only that side yard, it's also the other side yard. So if you're a common wall two-family dwelling,
You only have
your
one side yard.
6-foot side yard setback is your other side yard. And also for accessory structures. Accessory structures are, their side yard setback are dictated by that side yard setback of the zoning designation in which you're located.
But it specifically says where the common walls meet.
Right.
it's true.
If your common walls meet, a common wall to me is actually one wall.
Right.
It's a
Yeah.
common for both sides.
So is this-
So there's no space in between for,
My thinking is that this is just to keep some jackass from going out there and causing a ruckus and being like, well, technically,
Probably. I understand it, but
Well,
I
if
don't
you have a common wall house and you decide to put sheds in the backyard, technically, you could put them right up against each other. You don't have any side yard setback on that line, right? Or would you have to go
I disagree.
4 foot
I would
offset?
say that's why it
off the
specifies
line.
that there's a 6-foot side yard setback for common wall two-family dwellings.
But
For
most
both
of-
the other side yard, you have 2 side yards, not just the common wall side yard. The other side yard, and for both side yards in the instance that you're referring to an accessory structure.
But most two-family dwelling houses, the rear yard is divided by a fence going right straight down the dividing line of the wall of the building. So technically, could they ask if they put an accessory structure in the backyards, request a variance for the side yard setback for the shed on that side? Theoretically.
Yeah, I suppose you could. I knew this portion of the review was going to be difficult. to
Well, it's
keep a handle
enlightening.
on. Yeah. The other thing, like Bill mentioned, the other thing with the R3 development standards, I think there may need to be some modification, potentially to lot area and potentially to lot width. Many, I would have to look, but I think there's probably numerous examples of lot widths in the current R3 zoning designation that do not meet 50 feet. And like Bill said, particularly with some that may have been torn down with land bank money or whatever the case may be, they tear down a house that's on a lot that's only 42 feet in width, and then you have a non-conforming lot. So I would say potentially look at the lot area for R3 for single-family detached dwellings. Lowering that and lowering the minimum lot width for single-family detached dwellings as well. I think 40 feet is probably a more realistic number.
I've seen many of the,
But there's probably
lots.
some that are below 40 feet even.
I've seen many of them that are down to 32 and 33 feet
Yeah.
in width.
Yep.
Those are specifically the ones I was referring to when I was talking about
Mm-hmm.
the
Yep,
tiny homes.
yep.
So you're talking about the R2?
R3, 1163.05, A1 and B1.
What square foot do you want? Would you want to drop that down to? I mean,
If it's 40 feet,
if you drop it down to, I don't know, 4,000 square feet, that's minimum.
if you're, that way, if you're at 40 width and you have 100 foot and you're 100 deep, you have your,
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few lots in R3 that are
most of them.
30 or 40 foot wide and 130
I mean, I think most of them are probably gonna be, I think
Most-
it's
most
more of
blocks-
a width issue than a depth issue.
Most of the blocks in town are 100, anywhere from 125 to 135 foot deep. And that's if you have an alley.
So then 4,000 would be fine.
Yeah. You want to do that for A1 and A2? Or keep 5,000 for,
No, I think you can keep a larger requirement for a common wall two-family dwelling. I think that's fair.
and then B1, 40?
That's what I think anyway, so, you know.
Jim, what do you think about that minimum lot width? Do you like 40?
Sure.
I mean, most of the lot widths in town are anywhere from 35 to 40 foot. And then if you look at, well, up to a certain point, I don't remember if it was, when it was, but when town got laid out, most of the lots were 35, 40-foot lots. Some areas, they were 50. And then, if you look at certain areas, if they were developed post-war, they were 50 or 60 foot, maybe 70 over off of Whetstone and Hopley. But I think most of the city lots are 35, 40 foot. Up north off of Dudley, that whole area where it's all field, where it could be developed, all those lots are only, Landon, were those 40-foot lots originally, or were they 50?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I thought they were 40-foot lots, and you'd have to buy 2 or 3 lots just to put a house on it. So,
Well, I know of a specific lot that is only, it's 50 feet wide, but it's only like about 42 feet in depth. And it would make an ideal little spot for a tiny home if that house ever goes away. But, I mean, there is a house on it currently.
is it over off of Plymouth Street?
North Walnut,
Oh.
all the way up to the end of the 400 block.
Is it a corner lot?
No.
Oh, no, okay. Yeah, it's odd then. It's only that deep.
Couldn't put much on it with the side yards and rear yards.
What's that?
You couldn't put much on it because it's side and rear yard setbacks.
Where? That's what I said, a tiny home would work on it.
Yeah, that's true. So minimum front yard depth, keep it at 20. Really can't change building setback distances. I guess we could, but
Is there any discussion for 1163.05G, maximum lot coverage? That does pop up from time to time in the R3 district when requests are being made for accessory structures. My understanding of such requirement is related to both fire safety and stormwater drainage. Because it is a densely developed area of town with the smallest setbacks for a zoning district, they are close together, which, you know, can lead to the spread of fire. And then they are densely developed, which adding any additional impervious surface can cause stormwater issues. Is 50% a fair number, I guess, is.
What are you suggesting?
Well, R3 is the only district that has.
That has that, that's correct. And that is because of because of the fact that it's the most densely developed areas of town.
Right.
I was just bringing it up because it is an issue that does come up in zoning review from time to time. And like Bill said, them being the only district that has such a requirement. If anything, I would increase that potentially just a smidge, but I just wanted to bring it up because it does come up from time to time.
Accessory structures. So that's the total area of the lot besides the house. So if you got a.
House and accessory structure.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good chance you could be over 50%.
So
you're
if you
in-
happen to have a large house in the R3 zoning district, then you're limited in how big a garage or addition that you could put on based on that 50% coverage number.
So you want to allow them to build a bigger structure?
I'm just opening it up for discussion.
That's what this is.
Yeah. It comes up.
But I
in-
like the idea.
Yeah, it comes up in review from time to time, and is 50% just a smidge too restrictive, being that you're already in the area with the smallest lots.
I mean, if somebody wants to totally fill in their lot with a garage and a house,
Well, you don't want to do that either. I don't want to see it go away necessarily, because I think there are risks for fire and stormwater issues if you do that. Everyone build on top of one another.
yeah.
So let's say you have a 40 by 100 lot, that's 4,000 square feet, you have a 2,000 square foot house. That leaves you 1,000 square foot for a building, correct? Yes or no?
If you have a 40 by 100 lot, you have 4,000 square foot. If you have a 2,000 square foot house, you're already at your 50%.
Yeah, you're already at 50%.
So you would not be allowed to put an accessory structure on.
I don't like being told what to do in the property.
We know.
I agree with it.
And we hear it all the time. Why can't I build what I want to build on my property?
Oh, when I get to the Supreme Court, we'll change it.
Anytime soon?
I don't know, you know a guy?
Yeah, I could say I knew him when.
I got his autograph.
So if anything, increase it to, I don't know, 60%, 55%, 60%. I was just holding it up for discussion. It seemed a bit restrictive to me, and it does come up from time to time.
So,
I would agree with that, and I think that it should go to at least 60%.
I'm thinking more, but
You might want to do a roll call vote on that one.
What are we looking at, 60%?
We can go higher than that, at least 60% though.
give me a second. So what's a two-stall garage? Normally, 30 by
24 by 24.
24 by 24.
480, is that 40?
24 by 20, that's 567, or 566.
My math might be wrong.
Don't look at me, I became a lawyer because I.
576.
I'm thinking like 75.
576 is 24 by 24. So you want to bump this up to 75%?
That's my suggestion, yes, that's discussing. I'm not telling them what to do.
Bill, what percentage do you think it should be?
I'd like to see it at 75.
75 is fine with me. I mean,
Landon?
I'm okay with that.
Is it too much or not? You hesitated.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting to be a smidge high, it just,
I'm just thinking of that one guy a couple weeks ago that came in asking about putting an accessory. No. The woman that asked a month or two ago about putting a mobile home in her mom's backyard, and the house was already on a small lot, and wanted to put a mobile home in, and she would be covering 80-some% of her lot capacity. And of course, we don't allow it in that zone, but there would be nothing left of the yard. And the front of the house is at the back of the sidewalk already. So there really is no setback for that house.
I mean, it'd be an arbitrary thing to pick a number from my perspective anyway. I just thought an increase would be good without really looking at specific instances in the district. It'd be, I guess it'd just be an arbitrary number that we're picking.
Yeah, because each individual
Yeah,
situation.
they're not
is
all the
its
same.
own.
Yeah, they're not all the same. But less restrictive in this instance is why I brought it up, so.
All right,
If everyone's comfortable at 75, we can go ahead and say
Well,
75.
let's just go 70, I'll compromise.
Vicki, what do you think about percentage for the coverage?
Well, first off, we all know that if I have an opinion, I express it. Whether it's accepted by individuals or not, I still express it. I have my knowledge on this math, I will defer to you three. I'm comfortable with whatever figure you go with. I can't visualize, how much 70 feet is versus 50 feet, and so.
Well, I'm figuring, Guy, if I want to build a garage, I want a two-stall garage. Probably a little extra for my lawnmowers and stuff. That's the way I was looking at it.
Mhm.
But I was adjusting that on a small lot, which a 40 by 100 is actually a smaller lot, which that's what we're based on in Bucyrus, it's smaller lots. So,
I'm curious, what is the lot, what are my lot dimensions?
What were yours?
80.
Just out there, 80 by 120, I think maybe it was.
125, 135 out there? I've been surveying too long, I don't know lot sizes.
One of the concerns of going too large with that coverage area would be health
80
and
by
safety
125.
concerns.
how much?
80 by 125 is what Vicky says out there. But they don't have the square footage coverage requirement.
Right.
Go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
No, I was saying that health and safety concerns would be one of the issues with going too high on that percentage.
Yeah.
You got to consider the access to structures if there's a fire or an emergency,
Yep.
If the emergency people can get in to the area that's where they're needed.
Yep.
I think we should just, I don't know, I think we should just leave it at 50%.
I think we should increase it.
What's that, Jim?
I think we should increase it.
Yeah, I'm okay with an increase. 75 just seems a little bit high.
70, is that okay? We have a vote on 70?
Let's do a roll call vote on 70% for
What if you say 65?
That's what I was gonna say.
65?
After I did my long little spiel of,
Not understand.
The way I'm following
But hey, I'm
was
listening.
65
Yes.
originally.
what we're
And
saying.
then you wanted 75. And then we discussed it, everybody was on board with 75. Now we're back to 65.
Well, I sort of leaned towards back to 65, so during the discussion, because of safety reasons, and
I'm just making sure we're all following along.
65?
I'm good with that.
Bill, 65, good?
Good
Okay.
with me, yes.
For 116305, section G, maximum lot coverage. Roll call vote. James, me for 65%.
Yes.
Bill Stucker,
Yes.
Vicky DeShawn,
Yes.
Landon Hill,
Yes.
and myself, all for 65% of lot area. Okay.
Well, with that settled,
Yes.
It took 20 minutes.
we're edging up toward, well, we're past 4:30 here. What are the feelings on all the other topics as far as elimination of the R2 designation, as far as,
Are we just gonna end up eliminating R2? It's gonna be separated into R1, R3?
well, I mean, we can look at it on a case-by-case basis, please.
I was just gonna suggest, if we're at G, we've only got 6 more things. You guys just wanna push through?
Yeah, but we haven't, all the changes that we talked about, we never voted on anything, is what I'm getting at.
Oh,
Gotcha.
We've had general rolling discussions, but the changes that we did
I see what you're saying.
talk about, we didn't vote on.
okay, so we started having changes in the R1, R2.
Right.
So,
And I guess, Brandon, if we are open to elimination of the R2, what does the process look like for assigning currently designated R2 areas to new areas?
That's a great question I can look into.
Okay.
Would it be the flow chart of the amendment of the process of rezoning parcels within the city of Bucyrus?
I mean,
It could be.
ultimately, this body is making recommendations, right?
Correct.
And these go back to city council.
Correct.
And because these are ultimately gonna be alterations of the zoning code itself, they all have to go through public hearing.
Correct.
So would it be something that we could make a recommendation potentially as to what, if we eliminate R2, what those districts then would become?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then forward that
Can
on?
absolutely make that recommendation.
I guess it's a matter of if everybody's open to elimination of the R2. And then we also had the proposed changes to minimum building area in the R1. And then we also had the minimum lot area for single-family dwellings in the R3 and minimum lot width for single-family dwellings in the R3. Were the three, or were the changes?
for the R1, R2, wasn't it the changes for building area for 1 and 2 story? Okay. All right, so I got that covered.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to repeat that again.
Okay.
Landon, please.
So for my count, the changes we have proposed would be under 1161.05, reduction of minimum building area for 1 story from 1,800 to 1,500 square foot, minimum building area from 1.5 and 2 story from 2,000 square foot to 1,900 square foot for the R1 designation.
Right.
And then for 1163.05A1, reduction of the minimum lot area for single-family dwellings from 5,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet. And for 1163.05B1, minimum lot width reduction from 50 feet to 40 feet for single-family dwellings.
And then G.
And then G, yep, which we already voted on.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, we did.
So so those were I think those were the changes we talked about. We could potentially vote on those, and then maybe if everybody wants to take a further look at, eliminating a zoning designation is not a small thing. So if
Yeah,
everybody,
because can we add? Do we, I don't know.
I guess maybe that's something we can chew on and talk
So
about.
we just adopt R1 into R2.
My,
No,
my recommendation would, if we go that route, would you just, you eliminate the R2 development standards from chapter 1161. It goes away. R2 doesn't exist anymore. We take whatever is currently designated as R2, the areas that are currently designated as such, and we make a determination as to whether it should be absorbed into the R3 or it should be absorbed into the R1.
That's right. All right, gotcha. I'm on board.
Okay. So let's take a roll call vote on what changes that we have for 116105. Minimum building area, reducing the 1,500 square feet from 1,800 square feet. Ms.
Just a point of clarification. Can you ensure that a motion and a second is made rather than a roll call vote? Just for like
Okay.
minute purposes and clarity
Alright.
purposes. That way it's kind of like a,
I'll help you, Mike.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to, under 1161.05, development standards for the R1 designation, to reduce the minimum building area from 1,800 square feet to 1,500 square feet for a one-story property, and to reduce the minimum building area from 2,000 square feet to 1,900 square feat for a 1.5 to 2-story.
I second that motion.
and then you can do a roll call.
A roll call vote on that motion. Mr. Me,
Yes.
Mrs. DeShawn,
Yes.
Mr. Stuckert,
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
And I also say yes.
I will make another motion for 1163.05A1, that we reduce that from 5,000 square feet for a single-family detached dwelling to 4,000 square feet for a single-family detached dwelling.
And then,
I'd probably do that one
oh,
separate.
you're going to do them separate?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Second.
Roll call vote on that. Mr. Me,
Yes.
Mr. Stuckert,
Yes.
Mrs. DeShawn.
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
And then I will make another motion, 1163.05B, minimum lot width 1, that we reduce that from 50 feet required for a single-family detached dwelling to 40 feet for a single-family detached dwelling.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call vote.
Yes.
Mr. Me, Mr. Stuckert,
Yes.
Mrs. DeShawn.
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
and myself, yes. And G is already taken care of.
So now I guess it would just be what, maybe this is something we all think about, because, like I said, elimination of an entire zoning designation is not exactly,
That's gonna be a couple meetings,
well,
or next meeting.
I mean, if we can think about it in the meantime and talk about it next time, if we all want to study the map and see,
What needs to go where.
yeah.
And then we still
If
have,
we're all on board with that elimination,
Excuse me.
That's okay, is another question, I'm sorry, Vicki.
no, excuse me. And then we still have some more of
Yeah, we can get,
1163.05 that we'll be talking about at our next meeting.
well, we
Or-
can finish that up if
Okay.
we want to, yeah. I just wanted to get all that stuff cleared up
No,
before it got to be
understand.
5 o'clock and we're sitting here
Sure.
still.
Do we want to back up here to 1163.05 G. I don't think we actually did a motion and second.
I was
on that.
wondering.
Oh, no, we didn't.
I thought we did.
We just did a roll call.
Roll
vote
call.
on it. We didn't do
Oh,
a
yeah, that's
motion and second.
Would either of you gentlemen like to make the motion, or would you like me to do it?
You're on a roll, Landon.
I'll make a motion, 1163.05 G, maximum lot coverage, that the minimum, or that the lot coverage not exceed 65% of the area of the lot.
Second.
No, we have to do another roll call vote on that. Okay. Roll call vote, Mr. Me.
Yes.
Mr. Stucker.
Yes.
Mrs. DeShawn.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Any questions or suggestions on 116305 H1 for development plan requirement?
Those are relatively straightforward, I guess. And it's,
Why is it 10 units?
yeah, I'm not sure.
Shouldn't
New
that be
lots-
like 3 or 4?
It's specifically for new lots developed in the R3 district, presently undeveloped areas outside the older portion of the city may be developed in the R3 district, subject to the following regulations. It's kind of like trying to be a mini subdivision
It'd almost be like,
requirements, but that would already be covered by our subdivision requirements.
right,
So is that redundant?
yeah.
So would we like to strike that from the record?
I would like to sit and think about that
Yeah.
before we would do something
Okay.
Yeah.
to completely eliminate it.
All garages shall be located within the rear yard.
I don't like that one either.
Yeah, I was going to question
Yeah.
that too.
I was waiting.
I don't like the street trees.
Neither do I, by the way.
They shouldn't even be out.
And I definitely don't like sidewalks. But I'm trying to, we're R3. It'd be nice to know what those areas, I mean, I see the map, but it's like streets.
Yeah, so like, really, any area that you're gonna see.
I mean, I'm looking at this, but I can't tell
So
where.
it's the dark green on here, and it's, you know, we're proposing to add some of the light green into it too, but just the more densely developed areas of town, there's a good chance it's gonna be an R3 designation.
And could you like throw some streets out that were,
Walnut, Rogers.
Oh, okay.
Prospect,
okay.
Woodlawn, Oakwood. It just kind of depends. but
Okay.
I'm gonna see when that, if that was added to the fact, or if that's only to the 30.
I'm a national.
So I may backtrack when saying the sidewalks. Because I'm just thinking sidewalks because of,
Yeah.
you know, the issue that we had out in our area, which,
Yeah,
yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
I could see, you know, the streets that you're naming where I lived on Walnut Street. I mean, I would definitely want a sidewalk there. I would not want to be walking on Walnut Street.
Let's table these sections until the next meeting.
Sounds good.
We wanna, so we wanna think about, specifically, we wanna think about 1163.05H,
Right?
and we wanna think about the elimination of the R2 zoning designation.
Yep.
And if it is to be eliminated, where it will be absorbed. I can send, if not everybody understands how to get to the link, I could send a link to Miranda, and she could send out an email that contains the link that would allow you just to click through the zoning map. The links get set up so you can't make any changes. They're read-only, so there's no worry about making modifications accidentally or anything like that, but it would allow you to see that
The districts look like pizza
you could look
places.
at the specific R2 places and where you might think they belong.
Okay.
How can I make my computer work quicker, though? It is so slow.
You can come up and sit with me, we can look at it.
All right, we'll do that.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Do I have to vote on
I mean, you
Vote.
could
You
just
can just
adjourn
adjourn
it,
it,
but.
that's okay.
that?
you
Adjourn
can-
it. We're
You
done.
can just adjourn.
We appreciate you.
Microphones off.
And the time we're adjourning?
4:45.
Thank you.